Hello, welcome back. This is part 7 in my series of writing an expert advisor, where I'm going step by step, very slowly, trying to show everything that I'm doing. The expert advisor that I'm writing is a breakout expert advisor, and if you haven't seen the first 6 parts, then you really should go back to see them, because I'm not going to be covering anything that was in those again. And if you simply jump in now, you may well be lost in the detail. I expect that this is the last part. I've covered everything so far about writing the expert advisor, all of the rules for the strategy. I've gone through testing and some optimization. So I'm just going to cover 2 things today. Firstly, in part 6, I simply hacked some code to make changes. One was to change the way that I find the start and end of the time range, and I'm going to actually embed that in the code today and show where that happens. The other was that I mentioned that sometimes it might be better to set the volume for the trades based on percentage of equity, or sometimes on a fixed volume, and I generally like to use fixed volume. And I made a quick change to the code in part 6, but today I'm going to show how I would do that in a more robust way so that you can actually set it when you're running the code. So that's the first thing that I want to cover today, and the second is the writing of the code for the move to break even. So let's go straight into the code now, because there's a lot to cover today, and I will probably be just pasting a lot of these pieces of code in rather than typing them to save time. Hello, this is future me. I'm just inserting a little piece here to address some of the comments that I received, since this is going to be the last in this series. The first was about availability of data. Now, when I talked in, I think, part 6 about availability of data, it was based on some comments I had from people who were having problems with Metatrader 4 giving very different results. So what I said was fine for Metatrader 4, but in Metatrader 5 there's an other option in the strategy tester, and here I was using modeling every tick. There is another option here called every tick based on real ticks. If you select that, it does 2 things. Firstly, it will automatically download data for you. So where I had a gap, or you wouldn't have noticed it, but where I had a cut in part 5, where I said I had downloaded data, that's because I was actually going out and manually downloading all of the data that I needed to run a 2-year backtest. If you select every tick based on real ticks, then the strategy tester will automatically go to the broker and download that data for you. It still can't create data that's not there. So if your broker's not holding that data, then you won't get anything. You won't get any more by doing this than you would if you manually downloaded from the broker. But at least this takes care of automatically downloading. The other thing this will do is change the way that the interpolation happens. So with every tick, the ticks are simulated based on the open, high, low, close and volume for each bar. Using every tick based on real ticks actually takes tick data, which can also give a different result. Not necessarily more accurate if you're trying to predict the future, because who knows what's going to happen then, but it may give you a different result to the simulated ticks. If you are trying to use this to get the data automatically downloaded, then different brokers are going to have different length of data still. This is not going to create anything new for you, but at least it saves you from having to go and manually download data before you start running the backtest. So that covers that comment, and I'm not going to do any more on that. There's no point in rerunning the test. It'll just give a different set of results if I use the real ticks, and we know that it's going to be doing that anyway. The other comment that I got was that if you run this strategy test for the first half of 23, we're almost up to the first half of 23, then the results are very different to the results that we got for the 2 years beforehand. And that's to be expected, because as time moves on, the markets behave very differently. So I'm just going to run some tests. I'm not going to waste your time letting you watch them run. I'm just going to run them and then bring them up here and show you the results. Now first, this is the result from using the default settings and using the original 2-year backtest from 21 through to the end of 23. And you can see there we have a result of 30,794 profit with a starting balance of 10,000, and that's using 1% risk, and that's 1% on each of the 3 trades, so a total of 3% risk for each time we trade. Now I've just run the test again, and you can see here that about from the beginning of 23 things go flat and actually start to decline, and I've run this up to the 24th of June. If I look at the backtest results, 25,514. So we've lost money in the first half of 23. But also remember that I did some optimization. So I'm going to take the results of that optimization, which told me that I should firstly set these two to 0, and to make up the volume, I'm just going to change this risk percent to 3. And by making that change, I have a better result for the initial 2 years. This is the standard 2 years again. And that's a return of 41,691. So an improvement by just changing and removing the first 2 legs and just having that third leg. And now if I extend that out to June, again, you can see we go flat during the first half of 23 and a slight drop off at the end. And the backtest result is 36,000. So again, that drops in the first half of the year. This is to be expected. Different times we're going to have wins and losses. But if I make one more change, and you'll remember the other thing that I tested in optimization was the start and finish times. I'm just going to change one of them. I'm going to run this from 12 until 1 instead of 1 until 1. And I'm still running this for the 2.5 years up to the 24th of June 23. And now it still goes flat in the beginning of 23, but the drop off at the end isn't so much. And if I look at the backtest results, 68,928. So a little bit of optimization can yield a big difference. And remember that I haven't optimized up to the middle of June 23. This optimization was done just in the early parts of 21 when I ran it in part 6. So it's not like I've used curve fitting here and come up with something that is just the best number to use for the existing data. This is an optimization that I did for a much earlier time frame, and it still applies today. So that's all from future me. I'll let you get back now to part 7. Now for this final part, I have already created this breakout set and forget 7, which is just a copy of 5 from the part 5 and the breakout set and forget 7.mqh. So I've already got this so that it runs in Metatrader 4 and 5. I haven't opened the MQ4 here because I can do that later, but there will be no change to it. And in fact, the only change in this .mq5 is that I'm now loading the set and forget 7.mqh. All the work happens in that mqh file. The first thing I want to cover is a small change that I made in part 6. I didn't actually release any code for that, but I just explained that it might be better to have the risk as a fixed volume rather than a percentage of equity. And I also showed how to change the time frame from a 1 minute to the chart time frame. I'm just going to incorporate those here before I get on to moving to break even. The change to the chart time frame, that's one that I'll just build straight in to the code, but I'm going to modify the code so that the choice between using fixed lots and percentage of equity is an input, where if you remember in part 6 I just hard coded it to use fixed lots. First thing I'm going to do is remove this C position info. I don't need it, so that's kind of irrelevant to what I'm doing at the moment, but it didn't need to be there, so I've taken that out. And this is only for MQL5. Now before the inputs, I'm going to add an enum because I want to be able to select the risk types. So I have the enum risk type, and there are 2 risk types, risk type fixed lots or risk type equity percent. I'm going to be using those as inputs, and I've added a comment to each one, and these comments will show up in the input as the option. So it will show fixed lots or percent of equity. I'll just, because this is no longer strictly a risk percent, I'm just going to take out percent from there. And I've added the additional input here, which is input enum risk type. I'm calling this input risk type, and the default is risk type fixed lots. And so now you can choose between the fixed lots or a percentage of equity. With that, I'm going to remove this global variable for risk. Take that out. That means I'll remove this line. And then I just need to modify where I open the trade here. So there is the quick hack that I did last time, just to set the volume to the risk percent. Instead, I'll just leave those couple of lines there while I type the new lines. So that's a simple change. Let me get rid of these additional lines now. Just declare volume with a default value of 0. If the risk type is equity percent, then this is the same formula that I had before. I'm still calling the get risk volume function, which already exists. I'm actually doing the risk divided by 100 there, and the distance between the price and the stop loss. And if it's not risk type equity percent, it must be fixed. So just volume equals INP risk. That takes care of the risk change, and I've still got in here the changes that I made as a hack last time, where I'm just changing to period. So it will be up to you to make sure that if you're running, say, a 15-minute chart, someone's not entering a time that is to the 10 minutes. But that should be all you need to do, and this will work fine then. I'll do a quick compile to make sure I haven't got an error. Risk percent, where is that? Right. That was in that check, so input risk is less than or equal to 0 because I changed the variable name. Try that again. That's good. So now I can get on to applying the move to break even when the first trade closes. And I just want to explain first, and I'll go back to some slides to show you the issues that I faced, because I've actually already written this code to make sure that I could do what I'm expecting to do. And I've actually written it 3 times in 3 different ways, trying to find the one that I thought would be best for this situation. There's obviously more than one way to attack this, and they each have their challenges and drawbacks. So I'll go to the slides first, explain those, and then I'll go straight into the code and show you how I've implemented this. In setting up this strategy so that I moved to break even on close of that first trade, I did face a number of issues. And remember, the strategy says move to break even when the first trade closes, so I'm not looking for hitting a target price. I could have gone that road, but I wanted to make sure I followed the strategy. And there is a remote possibility that if I had tracked to the target price, then that price may be hit, but due to market fluctuations, perhaps the first trade doesn't get closed. So I actually didn't want to do that. I've stuck to the strategy and tried to build an expert advisor that would move the remaining 2 trades to break even when the first trade closes. So there are some issues that I faced in. I have to deal with restarts and shutdowns. So I can't simply track the trades that I have open. I need to be able to go and find the trades, because if you shut down Metatrader and restart, then everything goes back to 0 and you don't know what's already open without scanning for them. I also need to deal with shutdowns, which might mean that if Metatrader has been shut down for a certain amount of time and that first trade has hit the take profit level, then the broker has closed out the trade while you're not watching. So I couldn't rely on things to tell me when that trade is closed. Now, there is a function in Metatrader 5 that will tell me when trade activities happen, but I can't rely on that if I want to deal with situations where Metatrader may have been closed for a while. So that was my problem number 1. The next was slippage. In the tester, everything happens exactly as I want it to. All 3 trades are opened at exactly the same price. They even have consecutive ticket numbers, but that's only in the tester. In real life, they could be opened at different prices because they're being placed as 3 separate trades, and each trade is going to go through separately. And I don't even know that they're going to be in a sequential order. The second trade may be at a lower price, the third trade may be at a higher price. Because they're separate trades, they each get placed independently in the market. So I need to find a way of identifying the 3 trades that go together without knowing the ticket numbers, because they may not be sequential again in the real world, and they may not have the same start time exactly, because that can tick over by a second, and they may not have the same opening price. And then I need to deal with multiple open groups. So also remember that this strategy says that I open the 3 trades and then wait for them to either hit the take profit or the stop loss. If the price goes into a tight range after that, it's possible that I'll get to the next day and open more trades before those initial trades have closed out. So if I do that, then I can't simply say I only have 3 trades open or 2 trades open or 1. I could have 6 trades open over 2 consecutive days. And in testing, I actually found there was a situation where I had 3 days of trades open before the first day's trades closed. That's a little unusual, but I need to deal with it. I can't just ignore situations like that. And then finally, I didn't want to be calling some routine every tick that's going to scan through all of the trades, because ticks happen when there's a market event, but I'm only interested in these trades opening and closing. So I want to find a mechanism that allows me to just run this routine as few times as possible. So to address those issues, I made a number of assumptions. I assumed that the 3 trades, although they may open at different times, will all be within 5 minutes. 5 minutes is a very long time. I expect that it's possible that I'll open one trade and the second will tick over and the next trade happens, but it would be very unlikely for 5 minutes to go by without opening all 3 of those trades. So when I'm identifying the trades as a group, I'm going to be looking for trades opened within a 5-minute window. I'm not worried about the price they're opened at. I still expect that to be fairly close, but because there is slippage, they may be opened at different prices. But I do believe that within 5 minutes, I will find those trades. It's possible that the second group of trades for another day will be opened in the same trading day, but very unlikely that they're going to be opened within the same 5 minutes. So I think I'm safe with that assumption. I'm also assuming, and this I guess is part of the strategy, that the first trade that's opened is going to be the key to moving to break even. So I haven't built anything into the code to enforce that that's the trade that drives break even. Remember, if you set the take profit to 0, I simply don't take that trade. I haven't done anything about that. I'm just allowing you to open all 3 trades. And if you want to build in some checks to make sure that the first trade is actually there or has a take profit so that it actually gets opened, then you can do that. I'm also assuming that because I'm placing these 3 trades sequentially, the first trade will be opened before the second trade, before the third trade. Now, this is important because if I trigger the search to see if trades have disappeared, if the second trade's been opened and the first hasn't been opened yet, then it would look the same as the first trade having closed. So I'm making an assumption that the first trade will be opened first, and then the second and the third. And the final assumption I've made, because the method that I'm choosing to know when something has happened is simply by comparing the number of positions that I have. And I'm taking a very blunt approach for speed purposes. I'm just comparing the total number of positions. So I'm also making an assumption that within a single tick, you don't both open and close a position. So the number of positions doesn't stay the same, although activity happens. So now I've gone through the issues and the assumptions, and I'll go to the code to show how I've solved this. Now, I am going to be jumping around in the code a little bit because if I show some things now, they're out of context and I want to show them as they're needed. So I'm going to be working my way down the code, writing things, but I may need to jump back to the top of the code or down to the bottom as I write functions or make other changes. Now, firstly, I want you to have an option to use break even or not break even. So I'm going to have an input here where you can select true or false, whether to use the break even. That's just a Boolean. INP use break even equals false. That's the default, and move to break even on the first take profit. So remember, I'm only moving to break even when trade number 1, which is the one selected with this take profit 1 pips, when that closes. I need to track which of the trades is open and which is closed. And I think the easiest way in this situation is if I give each of them a different magic number. So there's a single magic number here as the input. I could set up 3 inputs. Instead, I'm just going to take that as the magic number for the first trade and then add 1 to the magic number for each of the other 2 trades. So I'm defining 3 magic numbers, 1, 2, and 3, just initializing them to 0 here, and I'll set up the values for those in the onInit function. So going down to onInit, I'm going to put them in here. So magic 1 is just the input magic number, magic 2 is 1 plus 1, and magic 3 is 2 plus 1. So 3 consecutive magic numbers, and I'll be able to detect each of those 3 trades from that. Now I'm going to handle the break even in a single function that will call other functions, but I also want to handle that shutdown and restart. If I restart the expert advisor, all memory has been lost, so I don't know which trades are already open. That means I need to be able to go out and scan all the trades that are available. Also, if there's been a shutdown, I don't know that a trade might have closed while the system was shut down. So I'm going to call the update break even once here in the onInit, and then it will be called repeatedly from the onTick function. So that's my single function called update break even. I will also call that function here at the beginning of onTick, because for each tick I don't know if I'm going to move to break even. But if I call this on every tick, I'm creating extra load. I mean, these trades are not going to close that often. What I want to do is have a way of knowing that something may have happened that makes me want to call that. So I'm going to introduce another global variable. This is where I'm starting to jump around in the code. I'm just going to call that position count. I'm also going to initialize that in the onInit function. And then what I'm going to do here in onTick, so I still want to call update break even once when we first start, but in onTick, I'm just going to say if position count is not equal to positions total, that's when I call update break even. And inside update break even, I'm actually going to update position count to be the same as positions total. That way, if a new trade is opened, or if a trade is closed, or if a position is opened or a position is closed, I will be calling update break even. Now, it may mean that I'm calling it more often than I need to because I'm going to be opening and closing positions possibly on other symbols or for other strategies, but this will minimize the number of times this update break even gets called. If you're looking at Metatrader 5, you may be saying I could have used the on trade event. That on trade event actually gets fired multiple times every time a position is opened or closed. So it would actually create more load than just checking this position count against the position's total. So I've chosen to go with this. The risk here, and I mentioned it in the slides, if for some reason within a single tick this account in Metatrader opens and closes a position at the same time, then the position count may not change, or the position's total and the position's count may remain the same. I think that's so unlikely, I'm not worried about it. In order to do this though, and remember this is common code for Metatrader 4, the positions total function doesn't exist in Metatrader 4. So I'm going to write that function for Metatrader 4. And just before I do, I've noticed just looking at this, because I have 3 different magic numbers now, I can't just set magic number once here. So I'm just going to comment these lines out. I'll deal with that in a minute. So the positions total function, I'll just put that at the end of the code. And I have mentioned earlier the macros for MQL4 and MQL5. I'll just put the MQL5 section in there because there will be some things to go in there. But for now, I've created now this positions total, which will work for Metatrader 4, and it just returns orders total. In open trade, as I said, I now have 3 magic numbers. So I have open trade that simply takes the type and the price where the trades are going to be opened, and it in turn calls a second open trade function which takes the type, the price, the stop loss and the take profit. I'm going to add one more argument to that where I can pass in the magic number for each of these trades. And that means that here where I've got INP magic, I just change that to magic, which is the variable that I'm passing into this function, and the same. And for MQL5, there is no magic number argument in the position open. Remember, we used to have set expert magic number. I'm just going to have to call that before I place each trade. And then I think if I compile that, I'll just get one error because I haven't written the update break even yet. Yes, well, I've got multiple errors, but they're for the same thing, update break even. So now it's time to write the update break even function. I'll just put it down here at the end of the code, or just before the special MQL4 and MQL5 sections. So the first thing I'm doing is checking that input. If not input use break even, return. So if you don't want to break even, if you don't want to move to break even, then it will just return here. And now to process this break even, and this is part of the complications that I had, what I want to do is find all 3 of those trades, or as many of those trades as are still open. I want to know if they've already been moved to break even, and I want to know if the first of those 3 trades has been closed. So I'm going to set up some structures. Now, I don't think I've introduced structures so far in this, so let's go to the top of the code. This is where I'm jumping around again, and I'll define these structures for you. So first I want a structure that holds the important data for a single trade. So out of that group of 3 positions, I want to hold the data for just one of those so that I know how to reset the stop loss on that. And the syntax for a structure is struct, the name of the structure, the open bracket, close bracket, and you must end with a semicolon. I haven't put anything in here yet, this is just the outline of it. So a structure is a way of holding compound data, and you'll see as I define this. So by doing this, I now have a structure called strade_data. I am able to declare variables of type strade_data, and each of those variables will have a sub piece of data which is called ticket, price open, and take profit, and they'll be long, double, and double. I'm also able to define that when a variable is created of strade_data, it will automatically fill values in here or perform some kind of function with a constructor. So what this says is that every time I create a variable of type strade_data, it will automatically set the ticket, the price open, and the take profit to 0. And that's a good practice because you don't know what data is already in these. If I don't specifically initialize these pieces of data, then they will be filled with whatever junk is left in the memory that is the space used by them. Now for the S-Trade data, I also want to be able to automatically fill these based on whatever is the currently selected position. So I'm going to create another function inside this structure called init. Now, these are three functions that I haven't written yet: position ticket, position price open, and position take profit. We'll jump down and do that. But they just return, as you would expect, the ticket, the open price, and the take profit from the currently selected position. So by calling this init function of an S-Trade data, it will fill these variables with these pieces of information from the position. And I've already determined from looking at this problem that these are the only three pieces of data that I need from a position. I'm not storing everything. So let me go to the end of the code now, and I'll write these position ticket, position price open, and position take profit. So here inside the ifdef MQL5, and I'm going to write them also for MQL4, but they're different. So position price open, if I could spell, position price open is as simple as calling the position get double function with the position price open argument. And the reason I'm creating these as separate functions is so that I can have compatibility with Metatrader 4. Take profit is the same. And that's with the position TP argument. And for ticket, I use position get integer. That takes care of those three. I'm going to duplicate those for Metatrader 4, but obviously Metatrader 4 doesn't have positions. I think I've got those right. We'll tell when I move to Metatrader 4 and try to compile that. But all I'm really doing here is substituting the order functions from Metatrader 4 and renaming them as position, price, open, take profit, and ticket. So this will work for both Metatrader 4 and 5 now. Let's see how we're going. So I've eliminated the error because now I do have the update break even function, but I'm not doing anything. Let me go back to the structures, because so far I've only defined this one structure for the S-Trade data. I have 3 trades in each group. So I'm going to create another structure that actually holds 3 of these S-Trade data. So for a group, I have this time, and as I mentioned in the slides, I'm going to be identifying a group as trades that are opened within 5 minutes of each other. So this is just going to hold a time that's within that 5 minutes range so that I know which particular time range this group belongs to. And then I'm using the S-Trade data, which is declared here, and I have an array of 3 trades then for S-Trade data. And just as I said, this is good practice, I'm going to include a constructor here for the S group data. And that's all I need for S group data. I just set the time to 0. And now while I'm here, I'm just going to add one more enum for Metatrader 4 compatibility, because I'm going to be using position types. So I'm using the ifdef MQL4 because I only want this for Metatrader 4. Metatrader 5 already has a position type. So I'm just declaring an enum of type enum position type. And I'm equating the position type buy and sell to the Metatrader 4 order type buy and order type sell. They actually have the same numeric values. It's just that these particular names don't exist in Metatrader 4. So I think at that stage, I'm ready to finish the writing of that update break even. There are some other minor functions that I'll need to add for Metatrader 4 and 5 compatibility, but they're single line functions like the ones that we've already written at the bottom of the code. So now in the update break even function, and I did say that I'm using position count to track whether I need to run this or not, so I'll just put that last line in here already, and now I can fill in the body here. I want to get a list of all of the groups of trades that I have. So I'm just going to declare an array of that group data, and then I'm going to call a separate function to load that in. And the reason I'm using a separate function is just to keep this code small. If I put all of this in one function, then it gets a little bit long, and I like to try to keep the function short. I'm going to call the function load group data. It's going to return an integer, which will just be the size of this array when it's finished. So let's write that function before I go through the rest of how we actually apply the break even. Now, if I haven't covered it already, here's the function load group data. It returns an integer, which is going to be this group count. It takes an argument of type sGroup data, but it takes an argument that is an array, and so that's a dynamic array. I'm going to call the variable inside this function group list. It doesn't have to be the same as this name, but it might as well be. But I also have to put this ampersand here because these arrays are passed by reference. And passing this by reference means that any changes I make inside this function to that variable will also apply to this variable. In fact, it's the same variable. It's the same piece of memory that I'm affecting. So passing by reference means I'm actually using the same variable in both places. The name can be different, but internally it's the same thing. That's different to another function where I might, let me find, here. I've got volume being passed into this. If I change volume inside this function, it only changes here. It doesn't change back where it was called because I don't have that ampersand as a reference. So by using the ampersand, this is passed by reference, which allows me to make changes inside here that will then show up here. It's also required if I'm passing an array. So I'm just setting up a variable here called group count, and that's going to be the size of this group list, and I'm resizing the group list array to 0 to begin with. And then I'm going through a loop looking at each of the positions that I have, beginning at positions total -1, while I is greater than or equal to 0, and counting down with I minus minus. So if I have 10 positions open, say, the index of those positions will be numbers 0 to 9, and so I'm beginning at 9 and working my way down to 0. This is just the way I write these. I have another video somewhere where I explain why I write these in reverse. And at the end of that, I'm going to return that group count. Now first, because I'm looping through these by the index of the position, I'm going to have to select that position. Position select by index is another function that I'm about to write, and I'll have to write that twice, once for Metatrader 4 and Metatrader 5. It just takes the index. So I'm saying I want the ith position, and this will also do some other comparisons and return a Boolean whether it was successful to select that position or not. If it's unsuccessful, then this continue statement will simply skip all the rest of the statements that I might put in here and go back to the next iteration of this loop. Now in Metatrader 5, position select by index, and I'm just going to paste this in because I've already written the code. So position select by index, as I said, returns a Boolean, takes the index position. The first statement, position get ticket, based on that index, that will return the ticket number from that position. And if that position can't be found for this index, then it will return a ticket number of 0 or less. So if ticket is less than or equal to 0, return false, because it means that the position select by index was unsuccessful. So in the next line, I'm checking the position symbol to make sure that matches the chart symbol, and then the position magic number to make sure it's one of the 1, 2, or 3 magic numbers that we have. This position symbol and position magic, they're also wrapper functions. I'm just going to write those now as well. The position magic is the same as position ticket basically. Just return position get integer for position magic. And position symbol is slightly different because that's a string, but again, position get string is the function for that, and the argument is position symbol. Now before I go back, I'll just go into the Metatrader 4 section and write this same function for Metatrader 4. So here in the ifdef MQL4, I'll also paste this code in to save time. Position select by index into index, so it's the same function name. For Metatrader 4, I use order select, index number, select by position, and mode trades, and that returns false if it was unsuccessful. And then again, I compare the symbol with order symbol, and that's an inbuilt Metatrader 4 function. And I compare the order magic number to magic 1, magic 2, and magic 3. And if they don't match, then false. But then for Metatrader 4, because order select can return pending orders, so buy stop, buy limit, sell stop, sell limit, I want to make sure that the order that I've found is an actual buy or sell. So I've got this additional check: if order type is not equal to buy and it's not equal to sell, then return false. So if I get to this point of returning true, then I have an order that is for an actual buy or sell. It's for the correct symbol or the correct magic number. So back into this load group data, by the time I get past this line, I know that I've selected by index a position that is for this expert advisor. I'm only looking for positions where I have to set the break even. So if there is already a break even set on this trade, then there's no point looking at it any further. So I just compare. If the position stop loss, this is another wrapper function, if that is equal to the position price open, another wrapper function, then continue. So if the stop loss has already been moved to open price, then I can continue. So let's just add these two wrapper functions now as well. Stop loss is going to be basically the same as take profit, so I'll just make a copy of that and change. And the argument for that is position underscore SL, and I've already got position price open. If I go to the Metatrader 4 version of that, again, I can change take profit, make that stop loss, and the function to return that is order stop loss. I'll just do a quick compile to make sure I haven't made any mistakes so far, and that works. So there's no syntax errors so far. So now I have a position that's been selected, and the stop loss is not the same as the price open, so I haven't moved it to break even yet. And the next step is to find if I already have a group, so this group list is an array, to find if I already have a group that this can move into. And as I said, I'm comparing this based on the time that the trades are opened. Trades that are opened within a 5-minute window will belong to the same group. Now I've already written this code, so again, just to save time, I'm going to paste it in. So I'm looking for an existing group. I initialize an integer index to -1, and that's what I'm going to be using to hold the position of the group in this array. I'm just capturing time open with position time open, another wrapper function that I'll go and write in a moment. And then I have a fairly simple loop for int j equals 0, while j is less than group count, which is this count of the number of elements in the group list array, j++, so I'm counting up for this one. Time open minus group list j.time, so remember this, those groups in that list have a time element. I'm subtracting that from the position time open for that position. And then I'm using maths because I don't know if this time open for that position is before or after the time that might have already been set for the group. So this just makes sure that's a positive number. And if that's less than 300, 5 minutes, then I've found a matching group. And in that case, I set the index to j, and break will take me out of this for loop. If I get to the end of this loop and I haven't found a group, then index will still be -1. So I need to add another group. If nothing's been found, so if index is less than 0, I set index to group count. Now remember, group count is the number of elements in the array, but the array is 0 indexed. So if I have 2 elements in the array already, group count will be 2, but the highest number in the list will be 1. So I'm setting index to group count, and then I'm increasing group count by 1 with group count ++, and then resizing the group list to the size of group count. So if I've already got 2, then I'll set index to 2, increase the count to 3, resize the array to 3, and now the highest element in the array is number 2. And then I simply say group list index.time equals time open. And that way I've created a group and I've set the time to whichever trade I found first. Not necessarily the earliest or the latest, it's just one of the 3 trades, and I'm trusting that they are all within 5 minutes. So at this point, whether I've found an existing group in this loop or I've had to create a new group here, index is pointing to the group that matches the open time for this trade. So I want to fill in the data. So remember that each group contains 3 trades. There was that trades array that is trades 3. So depending on the magic number of the current position, whether it's magic 1, 2, or 3, I'm going to fill in that data in trades 0, 1, or 2 using the init function that is in the structure. So that will simply take all of the values from that current position and put it into one of these three elements of the trades array inside that group. If I compile, yeah, I need to create the position time open function. So that will be similar to position ticket, but it's a date time. So position time open, I'm still using position get integer, but I'm going to convert that to a date time. And the argument there is just position underscore time. And that's just order open time for Metatrader 4. And the reason I'm writing these wrapper functions that basically just return another function is simply so that I can have compatibility between Metatrader 4 and 5, and inside the rest of the code I just use position time open. So I think that's everything for the load group data function. This loop has gone through all of the positions. It has identified the open time and created groups of trades based on that open time being within a 5-minute window, and it's filled in the trades element, whether it's Magic 1, 2 or 3 inside each of those groups. Now what's important here is that if trade number 1, this Magic 1 or trades position 0, the first trade in that group of 3, if that has closed, then it won't be found when I'm building up this loop. So this element, trades 0, will still have just a 0 value for the ticket number. And that's what I'm going to use to determine if that trade has closed. If it hasn't been filled in this loop, then it doesn't exist anymore, which means it's closed. The data in the other two will be used then to simply update those with the new stop loss value. So now in update break even, I've called load group data. That has filled in this group list with as many groups as I have, and each group will contain one or more trades. So now I'm going to loop through that array, and I return group count from the function. So looping through int I equals group count -1, while I is greater than or equal to 0, I minus minus, just stepping backwards. And here is that test. If group list I dot trade 0, the first trade, dot ticket is greater than 0, continue. So the ticket is still open if I found it. And if that's still open, then I don't need to move the others to break even. And that continue will simply move to the next iteration of this loop. So then if I get to these two statements, I know that ticket number 0, or trade 1, the first trade of the 3, is gone. For all I know, one of these is already closed as well, so I'm also checking the ticket there. If trades 1 ticket or trades 2 ticket is greater than 0, so they're still open, then set break even. I've actually created one more function simply because it's the same code for each of these two, and it just keeps the code a little neat. So I call set break even using group list I dot trades I, and then the data in that trades element will have everything I need to set the break even. So I'll just need to write that now, and that's the end of the functions. I'm also going to just paste in the set break even. So set break even, it takes an strade data element, which is that dot trades. Each one of those is an strade data, ampersand trade, and again, even though this is not an array, because it is not a primitive type variable, it still needs to have this by reference. Even though I'm not changing anything in here, I still need to pass by reference with the ampersand. And this code is different for Metatrader 4 or 5. So for Metatrader 5, I'm using the trade object and position modify function of that, trade dot position modify. The ticket, so trade as a structure, has a number of elements, and so I'm using the ticket number. This first argument to the position modify is the new stop loss, and I know I want to move the stop loss to the same as the open price, so I'm just passing the open price in. And the second argument is the take profit, and that's why I stored the take profit when I was building up the array of trades. For Metatrader 4, the function is order modify, which still takes the trade ticket, but it also takes the open price and then the stop loss price, which again I'm setting to the same as the open price, and then the take profit, and then an expiry, which is not relevant, so I can just pass in 0 there. This returns a Boolean, and I get a warning if I don't do something with that Boolean, so I'm just assigning success equals, and that just gets rid of the warning message. I'm not using success for anything here. I think that is everything. Let me just... No compiler errors there. Now if I go to the MQ5 version, this is opening breakout set and forget 7. Compile that. So that's everything. I did jump around a bit, but you can download this code so that you can catch up with what I've done. I think the final thing I'll do before I wrap up then, I will run the expert advisor without the break even and then with the break even, just to show the difference in results. So now in the strategy tester, I'm ready with the breakout set and forget version 7. I've gone back to the every tick model, and from January 21 to January 23. This will actually go to the 31st of December 22. The inputs, I have the default values here, 15, 35, and 50, and I'm moved to break even on first take profit. That is false at the moment. Risk of 1, and I'll just change that back to percent of equity, and then I'll run. So that's the default run, and the result from that is 26,970 profit. If I change the inputs now to break even on first take profit, true, and the backtest result 14,976 in profit. Now that doesn't mean that moving to break even is a bad strategy for this. It just means that for the 2 years of data that I'm testing, it doesn't work as well as not having the move to break even. So I'm going to call that an end to this series, the 7-part series where I've shown how to build up an expert advisor from beginning to end. This is a breakout expert advisor, so we didn't use any indicators, no technical indicators at all. I've gone through creating the expert advisor, backtesting, and a certain amount of optimization. You may want to explore those things a little further yourself. But that's the end of this series. I will probably be back with another series where I create an expert advisor that uses technical indicators and maybe some other types of expert advisors. But I expect that I'll be starting with this current expert advisor as a base and just modifying that as needed. So I hope this has been useful to you. I hope you've followed through all 7 of these parts. And if this has been useful, then please click the like button. And if you want to see more videos, click subscribe, bell icon, and you'll be notified when I release new videos. Thank you for watching.